Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you guys are doing well today. Hope you're drinking water, staying hydrated, have eaten something today, and I hope it's been a good day. I don't have too much to say. I got up, did all my classes, been working on schoolwork, or at least trying to get the motivation to do schoolwork. It's difficult right now, and being very tired because the weekend is still taking its toll on me a little bit, but that's okay. Today we are here and we are back to read some more Stolen Tongues. Last we left on chapter 4. I'm not going to do a recap every stream, so if you guys are new to this story and you don't know what's happening, I recommend going to my YouTube channel and checking out the other VOD to catch up, because we are on chapter 4 right now. So honestly, I don't have too much more to say. I just kind of want to jump right into it, so that's what we are going to do. Let's switch on over and let me get out my spooky music. I think that's a good volume. Alrighty, we are just gonna hop right into it. And as always, I am going to be reading a page at a time. I'll do a page and then check chat and respond, and then do a page, check chat, respond, so I don't really have to break it up as much and take you guys out of the story. Alright. Chapter 4. It was Saturday now, and the morning was not nearly as jovial. Faye and I both awoke exhausted, and were dismayed to find the windows completely caked with ice. More than a foot of snow had dumped down on the mountain during the night, and plenty more was still coming as I opened the front door. The woods had disappeared, completely shrouded behind a wall of falling flakes. I could barely make out our poor rental car in the driveway. There was something else out there, too. A trail had been forged through the snow on the deck. It snaked around the side of the house. I reasoned that it must have been freshly made. Given the rate of the snowfall, it was rapidly vanishing even now. Could it have been the ranger? I prayed that it was, but my gut told me that no one was coming to save us in this blizzard. The one road that led up here was an icy death trap with zero visibility. Only a crazy person would be outside right now. I winced at the thought and slammed the door shut. Faye and I stayed inside with the heater on, trying to distract ourselves from the eerie hush that had descended upon the landscape. Our romantic cabin getaway wasn't going exactly as planned, but we still had each other, and I was hoping that was enough to salvage the rest of the trip. "Do you remember the first time you had one?" I blurted out, breaking an hour-long silence. I fiddled with the router while Faye lay on the floor playing Super Nintendo. "Had what?" she said, distracted. "You know, night terrors." The sounds of little monsters being knocked into a swamp issued from the TV. I was a kid. The earliest one I remember was of my mom leading me down into our basement. My dad had a big entertainment center down there, so I was never allowed to go by myself. They thought I'd break it. "Sounds rough," I interrupted. "I wish our house had stairs, growing up. In fact, I wish we had a house." Faye took her hand off the controller long enough to flip me a middle finger. We both laughed. "The staircase was long," she continued, "at least in the dream. I don't remember if it really looked like that, but we fell down it, both my mom and me. As we fell, it got darker and darker. I woke up before I reached the bottom, but I remember seeing a face down there, a really scary one, looking up at me, waiting for me. When I woke up, it was still there in the room, then slowly faded away." "You're freaking scary, you know that?" I said. "You should see me when we're out of chocolate," she replied. "What do you think causes them?" "Night terrors?" "Yeah, I mean, for you. Why you? Why not your mom or Becca?" "My dad had them," she said, pausing the game. I gave up my tinkering and slumped onto the couch. Faye joined me. "He doesn't seem the type," I replied. "Oh yeah, a couple times when I was a kid, I remember hearing him at night. He was a medic in the late 60s. I learned more about him when he was asleep than from talking with him for 26 years. It made sense. Greg was absolutely grizzled, and had all the personality of stone. He seemed out of place in his big, beautiful house. "Does it still happen for him?" I asked. "No, it stopped a long time ago. They came all of a sudden, then disappeared shortly after. I guess I'm the lucky one." Faye hammered away on the game, occasionally swearing under her breath. I had nearly fallen asleep next to her when a wail from outside startled us both. I sat up, listening. Faye had a 1,000-yard stare on her face. When the voice cried out again, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Hello?" it called. I scrambled to shut off the heater so we could hear better. I give up. Please." The voice sounded distant, maybe a few 100 feet away from the cabin, near the edge of the forest. Faye jolted straight up from the couch and marched over to the front door. She swung it open and stood there, ignoring the wind that battered her face and the snow that toppled onto her bare feet. The voice babbled at length, but was interrupted by gusts of wind. I couldn't make much of it out. An equally strange noise erupted from Faye's mouth. It wasn't a gasp of fear, but rather one of anguish. It was the kind of sound you'd expect to hear from a family in an emergency room when the doctor approaches with an apologetic look on his face. "It's Grandpa," she said, in a horrified voice. "That's my grandpa." "What? What do you mean?" "It's him, Felix," she shouted, clutching the open door's knob like she was going to rip it off. "He's out there. I hear him calling." I had no idea how to respond to that. It was impossible. I approached Faye and held her from behind, listening to the voice as it sailed into the cabin on violent bursts of wind. "Where is everyone?" the man called out. Fear and misery hung on his words. Please, I'm lost." "Grandpa," Faye shrieked into the blizzard. "We're over here. I'm coming." She tried to tear away from me and dart off into the snow. I yanked her back and wrestled her into the house, screaming for her to calm down. I tried to tell her it wasn't her grandfather, but she fought and screamed. "Get off me!" she raked and clawed like a tiger. "Let me go! Grandpa!" I managed to kick the door shut with my foot, forfeiting my balance in the process. We toppled to the floor as one, crashing into the bags we'd left in the entryway. I held Faye like a living straitjacket until she finally went limp. She burst into tears. "What is going on?" she asked, sobbing. I knew she didn't expect an answer. I'd only met Faye's grandfather once, at her sister's wedding a few years ago. Alfred was a charming old man who loved cigars and muscle cars. We knew virtually nothing about him because he worked high up in the government and never talked about his life. But he was very open about how much he loved his granddaughters. After the reception, he asked me if I was thinking about becoming a member of the family. I told him I couldn't imagine my life with anyone else, and he said that my mother was very fond of Faye. That seemed to really score points with him, and he jokingly told me he'd vouch for me. I tried to joke back and said something along the lines of, "Well, if I'm going to be in the clan, there's something I've got to know. I've always wondered about Area 51. Alfred took a long drag on his cigar without taking his eyes off me, and his face became totally void of expression. Through a noxious cloud of smoke he breathed, "What's Area 51? Alfred dropped dead of a heart attack not 3 weeks after the wedding, and the news of his passing broke everyone's heart. It horrified me to admit that the voice outside of the cabin sounded just like him. But unlike Faye, I wasn't willing to risk my life to go outside and rescue someone that I knew to be dead. I kept my eye on Faye as she rested in bed, sipping hot chocolate and shivering with disquiet. A movie played on her laptop, but she ignored it. The experience had shaken her up badly, and now I watched her torturous effort to reconcile the voice she heard with the knowledge that her grandfather was long dead. With each passing sound, I had the morbid expectation that the voice would cry out again and send Faye into another explosion, but thankfully, it never happened. "It was him," she'd assert every few minutes. "I know his voice. I know it was him." I alternated between trying to call the ranger station and trying to get online to email them, but both attempts failed. At long last, just as the sky darkened to thrust another terrifying night upon us, I went out to check on the car. In case these odd experiences came to a head, I wanted to be sure that we had an exit plan, even if it was a dangerous one. Outside, it was colder than anything I'd ever experienced in my life. It was early spring, and Faye's parents had assured us that the worst of the snow had passed. But standing there on the porch, looking out at the landscape, I felt a ghastly chill even through my winter gear. The cold brought with it the silence of death. Not a single animal made so much as a peep for miles. Only the air itself made sounds as it whipped across the valleys and sprayed bits of ice at me. The car was a popsicle. A 2-inch layer of ice glazed its windshields, and icicles hung like jagged teeth down to the tires. What's the freezing point of gasoline? I wondered. Even worse, I couldn't make out the road at the end of the driveway. Everything was obscured under a blanket of pure white. In this blizzard, I wouldn't even be able to make out to see the guardrail that would keep us from plunging to our deaths. There was no way a ranger had made his way up here this morning, and there was no way we were getting off the mountain. At least not tonight. As I stood there reforming the exit plan, I heard a woman talking. She wasn't very far away at all, and seemed to be in a good mood. "Oh, stop it," she said in a thick Bostonian accent. She laughed my mother's laugh. "Look there, look at the windows." My brain instantly cramped. I could almost hear the blood water falling out of my head. A freezing feeling replaced it, followed by the sensation of all the muscles in my legs clenching up. "Hello," I said. The word died just outside my mouth. "Hello?" I tried again, louder. "You are too," she replied. "Did you see it? Up in the trees." I managed to regain command over my legs and circled the car, edging closer to the source of the voice. "Mom?" I asked, unable to believe what I was hearing. Unlike Alfred, my mother was alive and well, 2,000 miles away in Massachusetts. The woman unleashed a string of phrases, laughing hysterically. She dipped into a language I'd never heard before, then resumed speaking English. I couldn't make out most of it, but it almost sounded like the things she'd say at a dinner party. "They're on their way," she yelled. Her voice receded further into the distance. I took a few more steps towards it, calling out again. She always responded, but never directly replied to my questions. Suddenly I got the feeling that I was being coaxed into the woods. I turned on my heels and dashed back to the cabin. The little thing seemed too far away. Its glowing windows felt like lights disappearing at the end of a tunnel. "Down the hole," the voice shrieked behind me. "Put him down there." A flurry of incomprehensible babble followed. A lightning bolt of fear struck me, giving me the turbo boost I needed to practically dive into the cabin. When I was 16 years old, I smoked pot for the first time in my buddy's garage. It had a full-blown panic attack. That event seemed to unlock a hidden trove of anxiety buried deep within me, and the attacks continued for months afterward. Eventually, I visited the doctor, who referred me to a therapist, and together we developed coping strategies that helped me avert the attacks and deal with my anxiety before it pressurized and exploded. By the time I was 22, I had my demons under control, and the panic attacks disappeared. What's going on? Who's the voice he's going to? He's hearing his mom's voice coming from the woods. But what she was saying didn't really make that much sense to him. And he was saying that his mom is alive and very well 2,000 miles away in Massachusetts. So basically on the other side of America. I was even able to get stoned like a normal college kid. But standing there in the living room outside of the cabin, listening to the impossible voices outside, revealed to me that I had not at all learned to cope with my anxiety in a healthy way. I had simply learned to bury it deeper, and now all of those demons came rushing up to the surface. I collapsed on the floor and sobbed. My entire body shook. All of my muscles turned to stone. Wave after wave of nausea pounded the back of my throat. I tried to remain silent so as not to disturb Faye's rest, but I knew now that there was something far worse on this mountain than pranksters or peeping toms. I resolved to stay awake all night long to protect my partner and to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. Name of the book makes sense now. Stolen Tongues. They stole the mom's voice and the girl's grandpa's voice. Maybe they did. Faye passed out around 9 p.m., leaving me alone with my thoughts and the horrible noises outside. Snow crunched, twigs snapped, trees creaked, and other things went bump in the night. For each unidentifiable sound I heard, my mind invented a grotesque creature to cause it. I tried to keep myself busy at the kitchen table with grading and student evaluations, but my thoughts never converged on the task at hand. Instead, they wandered out the windows of the cabin, through the meadow, and into the mysterious woods. My desperation to leave Pale Peak was only matched by my desire to know who or what was out there lurking around in the dark. I filled up on oven-baked pizza and soda, plotting to remain caffeinated and cheesed for the remainder of the night. Just after midnight, nature called, and I crept to the bathroom so as not to wake Faye. I poked my head in as I passed by and was relieved to find her sleeping soundly under a pile of blankets. The door beside her was sealed and locked. The book is Awakening My Inner MatPat Theory time. I love this book because I love scary things that you can't see. I love things that your imagination can just run wild, picturing what it could be. So I haven't been here, but I'm here now. That is totally fine. No need to be sorry. We're happy to have you. Yum pizza. I know, bro. I was craving pizzas hardcore today. The curtains were drawn, a glimmer of moonlight pierced them, and lit up the room with just enough to act as nightlight. While standing at the toilet, I gazed out the window beside me. The sky had cleared a bit, revealing 1,000 glittering stars. My eyes scanned the tree line, which was just barely visible, and my brain parsed the significance of our experiences up here in the mountains. What did it mean that both Faye and I had recognized the voices outside of those of our relatives? Were we having some kind of shared hallucination? The possibility of radon poisoning crossed my mind. Many old buildings in the mountains were susceptible to toxic gases that seeped out of the ground. Did the dream catcher have some relationship to the sounds we'd heard? Was there some weird cult operating up here? As a skeptic, I didn't believe in ghosts or curses or literal evil, but those explanations were now a lot more sensible to me than anything else I could think up. Something moved outside. Just past the first row of trees, something moved slowly, purposefully, like a person looking back at me and sinking through the forest. A muffled voice rang out. I couldn't discern the words, but it sounded desperate. I slid the window open just an inch and put my ear beside it. The freezing air that seeped in felt like a death sentence. There was no way anyone could survive out there tonight without some serious military-grade winter gear. A burst of cackling laughter erupted from nearby. It was a woman's voice, but not one I recognized. She sounded elderly and angry. Her laughter came out dry and condescending. "Where is it?" she demanded. I shut off the light in the bathroom, hoping to make out the shape of a person by the trees, but the moonlight was too faint. "Is there... forget... his name?" Some of the words were lost before they could reach the window, but I could make some of it out. Then another voice spoke. This one was much closer, maybe right beside the cabin, and it was familiar. Not mine. Just a few days." My heart raced. I cycled through the faces of relatives and friends in my mind. It was a young woman. Mom and Dad's. I fell back from the window and caught myself against the sink. My body went cold. It was Faye. For a moment I feared she was outside, but when she spoke again I realized her voice was echoing from behind me. "You said he was a skeptic. You said it last time. You were right." Yes, I had to look it up because I couldn't put my finger on the word. I moved through the hall and pushed the bedroom door open. Faye was still in bed, asleep on her tummy as usual. She hadn't moved an inch. "Why?" she asked, drunk with lethargy. "Whose name?" The woman outside cackled again and muttered something I couldn't make out. Faye responded, "But I don't know." Yes, with me." Every inch of my skin crawled. Someone was outside having a conversation with my fiancé in her sleep, drilling her for information, asking for my name. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The insanity of it all, the incomprehensibility, numbed my brain. All I could do was fall heavily onto the bed and shake Faye awake. As I did, she altered the pitch and tone of her voice, imitating someone else entirely. "Don't let them in," she said. The sounds were otherworldly. They did not belong to her. They could not have even formed by her vocal cords. "Don't let him in," she said. A scream finally burst from my mouth, bringing her back to consciousness. "What's going on?" she asked. Faye instinctively retreated from me, as she had many times when coming out of a nightmare. If I ever wake her up instead of allowing her to come out of a dream or night terror on her own, I risk becoming a part of it. If you're in the woods and you're hearing voices of relatives you know are not there, if you can't get away, then literally just do not open the window and hear the voices. Literally. The urge to hear may be too much for mortal humans to resist. I would want to hear. I can't be like, "Ooh, I wouldn't want to hear." I would want to hear. But there's no way in heck I would ever leave the cabin. If I heard voices, I would listen, try to figure out what they're saying, but no shot would I ever leave. From her perspective, waking up to a dark figure sitting in front of her, reaching toward her, is horrifying. Normally, I'd have reassured her and said, "It's just me, sweetie, it's just me," and rubbed her arms, but what Faye had just done was something totally beyond her normal behavior. "What the heck is wrong with you?" is all I could blurt out. It took some explaining, but eventually Faye realized what she'd been doing. "Who are you talking to?" I pressed. "It's important." "I don't know, Felix," she replied, rubbing her face. Her hands were shaking. "What was she asking you?" Faye looked to the window, then to my eyes. It was so dark I could barely make out her features. "I don't know. I don't remember anything." I grabbed her hands. "Try, Faye. I need you to try." She swatted my hands away and distanced herself from me. "I don't know." We argued a bit. Faye struggled to believe what I'd heard, and it took me a while to realize she wasn't doubting me. She was trying to block out the possibility that something supernatural was happening. Faye was raised Catholic, and although she only attended Mass around the holidays with her folks, she still retained a strong belief in the existence of bad spirits. To her, there was another world behind ours, obscured only by the veil of death. Right now, outside, something seemed to be piercing that veil and calling out to us. I tried to explain why that was impossible. "Oh, I skipped a thing, sorry. This place is haunted," she said, more of an admission to herself. "We need to leave. We need to get in the car and just drive right now." I tried to explain why that was impossible, but her expression turned to that of a concerned animal. Faye was scared to death, and she wasn't going to be able to take much more of this mountain and its strange inhabitants. Just as I went to hold her, a new sound erupted our conversation. It was one we didn't expect. Both of us froze there on the bed, listening intently. It was another voice, weak but melodious, somewhere near the front of the house. Faye stood up first and followed the sounds into the gloomy hallway. I followed close behind. We stood there in the living room for a moment until she gasped in realization. It was a child, singing in the dark. I tried to make out the words, but much of what we heard was in some strange language. "Ah, soul me ado, a soul me ado. I'm a naked soul, me ado." Faye cursed and swore, terrified and outraged and trapped on a frozen mountain with the songs of a hell emanating from the woods. She stormed up to the kitchen window and threw the drapes open, searching for the kid. "Oh gosh," she said, clasping her hands to her mouth. I ran over and gazed out the window from behind her. Standing there, about 200 feet out, was the dark form of a person. It was an adult man, devoid of detail in the shadow of the woods. He stood just outside the tree line with his back facing the cabin. He appeared to be gazing up at the tops of the trees and never moved. "What the heck is that?" Faye breathed. She still clasped her mouth in horror, trying to avert a scream. This was the first moment at the cabin that I felt we were truly in danger. My senses sharpened into razors, my brain shut down all complex tasks, and diverted full power to primal survival mode. I grabbed Faye and dragged her down to the floor. The unseen child sang louder. He recited a common nursery rhymes, but his pitch wavered off-key like a melting record player. He stuttered and mispronounced many of the words, but not in the way a person might if he were practicing English. It was as if this boy were learning how to speak altogether. It almost sounded like a computer program mimicking a child's voice. Every few seconds he'd burst into hysterical laughter or begin humming a particular refrain over and over. Sometimes he'd blurt a random string of nonsense like pile up the twigs, gather the lambs, tie up the hogs, burn up the hags, and continue singing. Faye crawled away to the bedroom, then returned with her cell phone. After a few tries, there was a faint ringing against her ear. Dad? Faye swallowed hard, holding back tears. She sniffled and cleared her throat. Daddy, when you get this, please come pick us up. We need help. As soon as you get this, get in the truck. Come get us now. Don't wait. The boy called out again. When do we go inside? When do we go inside? I flicked on the front porch lights and headed to the back door in our bedroom, hoping to discourage anyone from approaching the cabin. As I hit the switch for the back porch, the distinct silhouette of a person glowed through the window curtain. It looked like a woman. She pressed herself against the glass with her hands cupped around her face, trying to peer inside. I approached the window, but the person ran off before I could yank the curtain open. He's still out there, Faye said from the kitchen. He's just standing there. Here's an idea. Go into the kitchen, look in all the drawers and cabinets, get all the knives, and hide in the bedroom, and wait for anyone evil who can stabby. That is not a bad idea. Honestly, just arm yourself. Honestly, just arm yourself. Probably the best idea. If you're stuck there, you might as well arm yourself. Faye and I spent the remainder of the night hiding in the bathroom with the lights on. She huddled in the tub with blankets while I sat against the door, clutching the dusty Magnum her father had left on a shelf in the closet. I had never fired a gun before, but just having it with us brought me some sense of control over the situation. Faye was such a talented artist and always had a sketch pad and graphite pencils somewhere nearby. Her busy work life had dulled those skills this past year, so she intended to sharpen them up on this trip. But instead of filling the book with Colorado mountainscapes, she now jotted down the voices we heard and sketched the man we saw. At dawn, her notes read as follows. So to clarify before I read these, she's keeping track of all the voices they are hearing throughout the night. So I'm about to read all of the voices that they heard throughout the night. Adult man's voice. Hello? Oh gosh, look at it. Look. Don't. They see in the dark. I'm lost. Show me the way. Could also be throw me away. Watch you, whoa my. Guttural, growling. It's dark out here. I see those lights. Yeah, I see 'em. I'll come down there. Don't think I won't. Don't smile. He'll see you. Teenage girl's voice. The goats led me here. Could also be ghosts. Lay it on the ground and burn it. Laughing. I can't feel my fingers anymore. I can't climb up. Crying. Oh, she talks in her sleep. Did you hear? I found a friend. Child's voice. Eat. Sol me adieu. Don't tell him your secrets. He found mine. Crying, whining. How do we get in there? Grandpa Alfred's voice. There's bodies still in the ground there. Never found them, but they're there. Laughing. Right here. Oh, they found it. I'm always standing in the same gosh darn place. 20 years. Can you believe that? Dig 'em up and burn 'em. All you can do. It's what a sane man would do. The chattering would disappear for hours and start back up again. By dawn on Sunday, I was at the end of my rope. I hadn't slept well since we'd arrived at the cabin, and my insides were all knotted up with stress. Faye was even worse. Her face had paled from hours of dread, and she gazed around listlessly with bloodshot eyes. She anxiously twisted the engagement ring around her finger and never looked at me. As soon as the sunlight poked through the bathroom curtain, I checked the house and encouraged Faye to get some sleep before she cracked. I ran my fingers through her hair as we lay on the bed, promising that I'd keep her safe. She forced a little smile. We fell asleep holding each other. It was after 2 p.m. when I woke up. Dazed, I snuck out of bed and went outside to see if Faye's dad or the ranger had come up the mountain. My heart sank at the view of the undisturbed road. No one had even tried to check on us. There was evidence of last night's strange activity outside. Dozens of tracks cut through the snow. They all meandered erratically. Some zigzagged to and fro, as if made by a drunk person, while others appeared to have been made by someone making enormous leaps across the field. 2 pairs of tracks circled the cabin 5 or 6 times, then separated and re-entered the woods in different places. One set of footprints moved in a straight line from the trees to the place I stood on the porch, and never turned around. I had a thought to go out to the edge of the property to see if that dream catcher was still there, but the forest seemed 1,000 miles away now. I was worried that if I entered it, I'd never come out alive. Moreover, that part of me was too afraid to even look at the strange object. At Faye's behest, neither of us had touched it, and yet I now wondered if simply being near the thing had put us in danger. Back inside, Faye slept deeply in a bright pool of sunlight. The clouds had vanished, leaving a crystal blue sky and that promised better cell reception. I kept the bedroom door cracked so I would hear her if she began talking in her sleep again, then grabbed the phone. Faye's dad didn't answer, but someone at the ranger station did. Rocky Mountain National Park Service, an older man grumbled. Pike speaking. William, this is Felix, up here at the Spencer cabin. Oh, hey there, he interrupted. You folks all right? Hey, we tried to get up there yesterday, but the ice. I need you to come up here right now, I said, walking out to the porch to avoid waking Faye. Get a snowplow or whatever you need and get up here. Everything okay? He asked, taken aback. Y'all need medical? I can call the hospital down in Orchard Valley. Those boys got a helicopter. Nobody's hurt, not yet. There's somebody up here in the mountains with us, walking around the snow at night, tapping on our windows, calling out to us. We want out right now. We've waited enough. The ranger paused for a moment. His tone noticeably changed. We got a snowcat in the Fritz, but it's getting worked on as we speak. Had to take it to the North Face to get some dumb nature photographers lost in the woods. Main center across the valley's got the big cats, though. I can call them if you think it's an emergency and they'll come out pronto. I took a deep breath and sighed in disappointment. A huge cloud formed as I exhaled. It's not exactly... I don't know what these creeps want. Seems like they're screwing with us, but we really feel in danger. Tell you what, the ranger said. I'll call him up there by sundown if we don't get old Crunchy up and running beforehand. How's your power? Good. And your water? Fine. Heat? Yeah. I booted a clump of ice off the porch and watched it roll into the snow. Just make sure you kids... I waited for him to finish his sentence, but it never came. Hello? I said, taking a few steps into the driveway. William? The call had dropped. I didn't bother trying again. Dusk fell rapidly. The sun dipped behind the mountain across the pale peak around 4 p.m., and I began to dread another night trapped in this godforsaken cottage. I mulled the idea of suiting ourselves up in our winter gear and hiking down the road before dark, but I shook the thought out of my mind. It would have been suicide to miscalculate the track or the light, and who knew what was really lurking around the forests that covered up the mountain. We had to stay put. Faye eventually woke up and complained about a stomach ache, turning down the sandwiches I'd made. Instead, I heated a bowl of soup for her, but she ran to the bathroom and vomited it back up after a few minutes. Her forehead was cool to the touch, so I figured she was stressing herself out. We watched one of the many movies we'd saved on her laptop. Eventually, she fell asleep again, leaving me alone to watch the last glimmers of twilight die to black. I sat at the kitchen table and forced myself to grade a stack of papers that were due the day we returned to California. Perhaps it was the flicker of the candles still burning from my lonely dinner, or the soft music seeping Faye's laptop, but there came a wash of heavy relaxation that compelled me to lie down on the couch. I committed to resting my eyes for only a few minutes, but soon disappeared into dreams of brighter places. A ticking sound woke me up. For a moment I froze there on my back, struggling to put an image to the noise. Something caught my eye out the nearby window. A faint light pierced between the edge of the curtain and the wall, illuminating the mud mat near the front door. The beam went on and off in patterns of 5. My stomach leaped into my throat as horrifying thoughts flooded my mind. I imagined some kind of creature standing in the darkness of the cabin, flipping the porch light switch up and down with a menacing grin on its face. Why mention the power and heat? You just jinxed them. The heat and power is gonna go out now. We shall see, we shall see. The moment I got up, the lights flickered 5 more times, then went dark. I peered out the curtain near the front door and didn't spot anyone. As I stared into the darkness, a groan erupted from far off in the distance. My first instinct was to check on Faye, to ensure that she wasn't talking in her sleep again. I wondered if she somehow attracted the voices by calling out in her slumber, but if she drew attention to herself with her babbling. The thought sent ripples of goosebumps across my arms as I made my way down the hall. "Faye?" I whispered, creaking the door open just enough to peer in. The bed was empty. I shoved the door open and looked around, finding only a vacant room. The sheets had been tossed off the side of the bed, and as though she'd been dragged off in her sleep, I ran to the old door that led outside from the room and tugged on it, but the deadbolt was secured. Faye was an accomplished sleepwalker and had been doing it all of her life. During the 5-year span of our relationship, I'd seen her descend stairs, open boxes, and try to operate her cell phone while unconscious. She was even capable of having semi-coherent conversations while milling around the house. On one such occasion, I heard a noise downstairs and went to investigate. I found Faye opening cabinets, taking things out of the refrigerator, and searching for her car keys. We chatted a bit about how she was late for work and how she hated her manager. To the uninitiated, Faye might have seemed totally cognizant of her actions, if not for the fact that she was completely nude and trying to heat up a couch pillow for breakfast in total darkness. Even I might have been fooled, but I knew what she was capable of, and I knew that stress was the catalyst. It wouldn't be too far of a stretch for Faye to sleepwalk right out the cabin and lock the door behind her. I ran out onto the porch and was met with a stinging winter breeze, but didn't see any tracks in the snow. "Faye?" I called out just loud enough for her to hear me if she was nearby. I didn't want to risk our creepy forest friends realizing I was outside, but there was no response. I ran back into the cabin and out the front door where the porch light had been flickering. I suddenly realized that it might have been Faye toggling the switch. Simple, repetitive actions like turning on lights are common behavior as sleepwalkers. The icy wood of the deck seared my bare feet. There was no one out there. "Faye?" I called out again. Panic surged through me when I didn't hear a response. Oh gosh, sorry, this part is so freaky to me. Warm couch pillow is my favorite food. I especially like to eat it, dude. Yeah, that's what I'm having for dinner too. I'm just gonna put, my favorite pillow in the microwave and take a big bite. Do it every night, Branches crackled in the woods across the street. My eyes searched for the source of the noise, and they landed on the rental car in the driveway. Something shifted near it. I squinted through the gloom and made out a figure sitting atop the roof car. "Who's there?" I shouted. It was a woman. She was naked, and her back was turned to me, long curly hair draped halfway down her back, and although it was silver in the pale moonlight, I immediately recognized it. "Faye?" She didn't reply, but one of her shoulders dropped and the other raised. She cocked her head as if to gaze at the stars, then looked down again. All of her muscles flexed, no doubt a reaction to the biting cold. "What the heck are you doing out here?" I yelled, confounded she had slipped past me. I suddenly felt like someone had tightened a belt around my chest. I thought I dropped dead of a heart attack right there on the porch. Again, she didn't respond. I turned to quickly grab my boots just inside the door, but as I did, Faye leapt off the car and dashed away from the cabin. She bounded through the snow toward the forest, limping as she did. "Faye!" I screamed. My voice shook the entire mountain and returned to me a dozen times. I dropped the boots and took off after her, instantly cursing the electric cold that sliced into my feet like razors. Faye had already made it to the tree line, and the darkness swallowed her whole as she entered the woods. A terrible dread replaced my surprise. I knew then that she'd freeze to death before I ever found her in there. Her only hope for survival was to wake up. "What are you doing?" A weak voice called out from behind. I slid to a stop just past the car and whirled around. It was Faye. She stood there in the doorway of the cabin, wrapped in heavy blankets. Her eyes drooped under the weight of exhaustion and illness. I looked back at the woods, then back at the cabin. The stupefied puzzlement on my face further confused her. "Felix?" she repeated. "What are you doing?" It took me a long moment there, in that driveway, to gather my wits. The sensation of cold vanished from my limbs, replaced with a numbness I could ignore. A realization dawned on me that I was being drawn out like a rabbit from the undergrowth. I stood motionless, staring out into the dark forest. I couldn't help but feel like it was staring back. "Clever," I said breathlessly. That part freaked me out when I first read it. Oh my goodness. In my masculine crusade to protect her, I had forgotten to check the one place sick Faye was most likely to be: the bathroom. I wanted to lie to her and tell her that I'd chased some elk away from the car, but instead I spilled my guts. My wide-eyed tale seemed to compound the misery of her stomach bug, and she lay there on the bed with a pillow over her face, begging me to get us out of the cabin once and for all. As if to answer her prayers, the unmistakable crunch and clank of a snow plow resounded from outside. She took heart at the sound and quickly threw on a jacket. I raced around gathering our things and peeked out the window. It was just before dawn on Monday morning, and Ranger Pike had finally arrived. Behind him was a cavalcade of happy sights, a police SUV and Faye's father, Greg, in his old pickup. I threw the door open as the men approached the porch. "I'm so sorry about how long it took," the ranger said, offering up his hands. A bushy brown mustache clung to his face and accentuated every movement of his lips. "Right on time, actually," I responded. "Where's Faye?" Greg said, stepping between me and the ranger. He was a bear of a man, a few inches taller than me, with his chest you could chop wood on. His chin looked like a brick, and on it grew a gray, perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, probably for striking matches. "Dad," Faye called out from behind me. She rushed over and threw her arms around him. "Goodness, sweetie," he said into her shoulder. "Are you okay? What happened?" Faye and I exchanged knowing glances, and when I opened my mouth to explain, she cut me off and said, "Long story. We'll talk in the car. Let's go." "We need to keep her warm," I said, holding my hand toward the truck in a please get in gesture. "I'll grab a blanket. And maybe some trash bags," Faye added. "Young miss need a doctor?" the ranger asked. He shifted his bulk into the path of the plow's headlights, throwing a gigantic shadow over the snowy meadow. "Just ate some of Felix's fancy cuisine," she replied, clutching her stomach. Everyone laughed except me. Greg ushered Faye back into the truck while the ranger and I collected handfuls of half-packed luggage. While inside the cabin, he asked me what was really going on. I took only a moment to elaborate on what I had said over the phone. There was a weird object dangling in a nearby tree, and a lot of movement and voices in the woods, some in a strange language. On at least one occasion, someone approached the windows. I left out the little detail of the woman sitting on top of my car. As I rifled through the room, throwing clothes into a suitcase, the ranger sat down on the bed. "There's been some activity reported up here," he muttered. "Weird stuff, I don't know." He seemed almost apologetic, and I realized he had deceived me by assuring us over the phone that it was pranksters causing all the mischief. "Weird stuff?" I echoed, halting my rampage through the closet. "Oh, nothing real serious," he offered. "Go on." "I mean, it's a mountain," William said. "People go missing up here. Some of them end up dead. Hikers say they hear things out there from time to time. Occasionally folks staying up here call us up, telling us they heard all kinds of hubbub in the wee hours." "Hubbub?" I said, hurling a shirt into the suitcase. "Ain't nobody ever been murdered up here, Mr. Blackwell," William replied, smiling and ticking a thumb on his badge. "Not since I've been here. Darn sure of it. I want to mention something that I don't know if you guys have noticed. The author of this book, his name is Felix Blackwell. This is literally him in the story, and that makes it that much freakier to me." I circled the bed and approached him. "You ever had a doppelganger of your wife try to coax you into the woods by sitting naked in your driveway?" I asked. William gazed up at me, completely lost. I grabbed the suitcase and left the room. Outside, the two officers from the SUV were on either side of Greg's pickup, speaking to Faye and her dad. The red lights from the trucks cast across the window, making for a surreal view of twilight. "Mr. Blackwell," one of the policemen called out. "You ride with your family. Officer Kennedy here is going to follow you in your rental." "Be careful," I said, tossing the keys up to the officer. "That thing's a death trap." "One more trip and we'll be ready," William called out. He carried 2 bags out of the cabin and stuck them in the plow. "Ranger Pike, you lead," the officer replied. The ride down the mountain was enormously relieving, and so beautiful that all our dark experiences momentarily vanished from my mind. I took the back seat so Faye could be next to her dad. Greg sat at the wheel, grumbling about the icy roads from time to time. It's based off a true story. I don't know if it's a true story, but I feel like he did that to add a little creep factor of a slight inkling in the back of your mind saying, "Is this a real story?" It's more scary watching a horror movie based off a true story than a fictional story. I can't wait for this to be made into a movie. It's being adapted into film right now, and I'm very excited. I didn't mind the slow journey as much as he did. At least we were getting the heck away from Pale Peak. Surprisingly, Greg didn't ask much about the cabin. Instead, he kept the conversation on us. In his usual leathery voice, he asked, "So, Felix, you tried to kill my youngest child?" I huffed in shock. I had no idea what he meant until Faye intervened. I thought he was talking about this little vacation. "He's ragging on your cooking, babe," she said, exhaling slowly in pain. "All right." I laughed. Normally your daughter's like a trash compactor. Eats whatever the heck she wants and still looks like a twig. Probably made a deal with the devil for that talent. I tickled Faye's side, but she winced and protected her stomach. "Not even Satan could protect me from your tacos," she moaned, rolling the window down. I instinctively jammed my fingers into my ears and ducked for cover behind Greg's seat. I'm a lifelong emetophobe and cannot stand to be near someone vomiting, or even the sounds of it. Faye, in all of her good nature and selflessness, kept that in mind as she puked her guts up into the freezing mountain air that swooshed by. She tried to keep quiet so as not to freak me out. Afterwards, I rubbed her shoulders in support and thanks. Through the rear view mirror, Greg shot a disapproving glance at my cowardice. I want to watch this now once it comes out. I don't know. All I know is that there's not a lot of information about it. It's basically only, it's being adapted. It must be very recent. "We left a bunch of stuff," Faye said in a weak voice. "I didn't get all my clothes. None of the groceries." "I think I got most of your stuff," I offered. "Didn't open every drawer, though." "We can buy you new clothes," Greg added. "Just forget about that stuff." The purplish gloom in the sky gave way to the deep reds and oranges, the first heralds of dawn's brilliant crest. The sunrise chased out of the darkness and glinted off the snow in a million places, bringing the entire landscape to life once more. My relief swelled with glowing light. The snow cat in front of us picked up speed a bit, sending plumes of white powder into the air and over the cliff. They glittered like diamonds as they fell. "So, Greg," I said once more, trying to redirect the conversation to him. "When was the last time you stayed up here?" He adjusted the grip on the wheel. About a decade or more. I waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. Why so long without visiting? Never liked the cold, metal in my knee and arm. Ah, I said, why not in the summers? Faye stuck her head out the window again, this time unleashing a horrible sound. I was too late to cover my ears, and Greg seemed happy with the disruption. Seemed to be getting worse, he said, rubbing her arm. Should take you to the hospital when we get home. Faye covered her face in embarrassment. At least Felix didn't make chili, she replied. That always comes out the other end. They both laughed. I didn't. Okay. Going to stop there because that was the end of that part. So I feel like that's a good place to stop. I hope you guys are enjoying so far. I'm having fun reading it. Reading it again and sharing it with people. It's really fun. I'm gonna switch it back over. Dang you, I need more. I'm sorry, you can get more on Wednesday. But I have to stick to my 1 hour long time frame. I like to be consistent. So I think that's about it. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're gonna be finishing 3 out of 10, the final 2 episodes in the series, which is really, really exciting. I can't wait to do that. And I think that's about it. So thank you guys so much for watching. We're gonna see if there's any friends we can raid today. But while I'm doing that, for those of you guys watching on YouTube, if you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. It takes 2 seconds and it's completely free, so you can always unsubscribe later. No friends are streaming right now, so we are just going to end. So I will see you guys tomorrow at 9 p.m. for 3 out of 10, and yeah, have a great rest of your day. Bye guys.